The views and opinions expressed in this podcast by the host and or the guest do not necessarily reflect the views of the host and or Paranormal Buzz Radio and or its sponsors. Use of any material produced by Paranormal Buzz Radio without express written consent is prohibited. Paranormal Buzz Radio will not be held responsible for you holding your knees, crying, and rocking in a corner in a puddle of your own urine, or being beheaded by a group of children in a cornfield. In fact, if you come across a group of children in a cornfield, we promise to make fun of you as you run away screaming in terror. Listener discretion is advised.
Ghost stories,
folklore,
psychics and mediums,
shamanism,
paranormal investigations,
haunted locations, and all that other weird shit.
You're listening to the Traveler's Moon Podcast
with the Paranomad, Chris Nielsen,
and Kelly McCarville, Moonspinner.
Here are your hosts, Chris and Kelly.
Sorry to kick off the show like that.
That's a way to start the show.
I was trying to keep quiet for the entire introduction process. And oh my gosh, it was killing me.
I don't know if they technically can hear us during the introduction. So it probably would have been better.
I just noticed stay quiet during that time, so I'm not going to risk it.
So instead, that's how you introduce the show.
Yeah. Well, I figured the last few I've been not like a little like, yeah. And this time I thought I'd save both of our eardrums and
all right then.
Just get a little phlegm out.
Well, what a way to start the show, because we are going to spend the next hour talking about our woo-woos.
I play with a woo-woo.
I've played with my woo-woo before.
You guys give me that kind of show, boys and girls. All right, so yeah.
For anybody who's just tuning in for the first time, this is not an X-rated show. Most of the time.
Is X-rated an option of podcasting?
I suppose.
There's no visual aspect.
We have to cross the line on occasion. I mean,
yeah, we'll get there eventually.
We get out of control. And if we don't get out of control, those people in the chat room, whoo, we get super out of control.
So yeah, we got a intuition-based show tonight. Basically, getting in touch with I guess that's how this whole thing started, the woo-woo. Getting to know, basically intuitive abilities, that sort of thing. So this is kind of the introduction. So if you guys have any questions and are listening to the live show on intuition, get those locked and loaded. Chuck them in the comment section. We'll kind of reach them. And as two intuitively based paranormal investigators, we'll do what we can to answer.
Yeah, and that's kind of where we were talking about different topics. And, so far, a lot of our shows have been kind of paranormal based. And we thought, we said at the beginning when we were setting up the show, what all are we going to talk about? We just talked about all that strange shit, So this kind of falls into that category of strangeness in a lot of people's minds. But we spend a lot of our time on investigation, working with our intuition. We spend a lot of time at presentations answering questions about intuition. So we figured, just a show kind of focused on that. What is it? What's the different types of intuition? How do we use it? How do other people use it? Just kind of a general conversation about it. But definitely, guys, for everybody that's in live chat, definitely this is a chance for you guys to come in and ask any questions that you might have, and we'll give you what we believe to be our truth. And if we don't know the answer, we'll make something up. No, I'm kidding. But
it's fair. They wouldn't know the difference.
No, we'll be the first to tell you guys if we don't know the answer to something, and we don't know the answer to everything. And that is okay. So, where do we want to start?
So we have this lovely collection of papers here. Just kind of tossing out random definitions. Let's start off with the definition of intuition according to whatever source you use to Wikipedia.
I honestly don't remember. So when we like to try to have some notes put together before we go into a show, because I don't know about him, Mr. Photographic Memory can remember the weirdest little details about everything. I have the memory of a newt. And so, if I don't write things down, I forget them. So somewhere along the lines of me teaching classes on intuition or doing a presentation or something, yes, I wrote down definitions. That's what this is.
So So the Oxford Dictionary, not Kelly's definition, the Oxford Dictionary describes intuition as the ability to understand something immediately without the need for conscious reasoning. Kelly's definition is
intuition is the ability to receive information without using typical channels of communication.
Very cool.
See, I have one of those voices too. Intuition has got, it's such a broad term because it's like this great big umbrella that so many different things fall under, and it's funny because some people are like, oh, I'm psychic. Oh, I'm intuitive. Oh, I'm this. Oh, I'm that. And it's like, but can you be one without the other? And I don't know. In my opinion, in my definition, it's all intuition. What do you think?
I think intuition is kind of the umbrella for, like, if you had like a little chart of subcategories, like the psychic, the medium, all that stuff. It's like it's underneath the category of intuition.
So you hate titles, and we've talked about this before, and we've talked about this in some of our other shows, but there are multiple different categories of intuition. And I think probably if I have to say the thing that bugs me the most about intuition is the titles. I'm right there with you. And it's not even because where you're not comfortable saying that you're a clairvoyant because you see things. I just don't know that clairvoyant is encompassing enough of what it needs to be. I don't know how to say what I'm trying to say right now. I don't fit in a box. I don't fit in any single one of these definitions because I fit into too many of these definitions, And I said it before.
That's why I have a hard time with horoscopes.
I lovingly refer to myself as a mutt because if I look through this list of things, I do a little bit of all of this at different times. So that the titles and putting people in a box and defining that you are of this, I have a hard time with that. But I don't know. I'm a mutt.
Yeah, and I feel like the labeling of things, I think that's an inherently, human process. That's how we make sense of the world. This is this, this is this, this is this. And at the end of the day, this is it's a category. It's not even something that you can really categorize. There's too much gray in all of this to try to fit it in some sort of a box.
Yeah, most definitely. And so let's talk about the ones that we supposedly are first, or that the titles that we probably are given most often. Do you want to start there?
Sure.
So the title that hit me first, the one that I said, well, I guess I'm this, or that other people would call me, was psychic. And according to what I wrote down, a psychic is a person who is able to receive higher guidance and information through one form or any combination of psychic powers. And I think that there's a lot of truth to that because it's a combination of ways of receiving the information. It's not necessarily just one way. But if you read that definition, if you say it's receive higher guidance and information through one form or any combination of psychic powers, that makes you a psychic too. How do you feel about that?
Well, so the way my brain kind of does things, I feel like that was already implied when I said, hey, I'm Chris. If I have to self-identify something as clairvoyant, that already, for me, implies psychic. For me, psychic is basically any type of getting that information type ability. And that includes all of the subcategories of like clairvoyant, clairaudient, claircognizant, clairolfactory. It's a thing apparently as well.
Look at you go throwing out big words. And I guess that's what I'm saying is that everything does kind of fall under that category. I don't know. that goes to the conversation of, there are people out there who would say I'm a clairvoyant, but I'm not a psychic. Or there's people who would say I'm a psychic, but I'm not a clairsentient, which that almost makes sense. But probably the biggest one of those that you hear people say is every medium is a psychic, but not every psychic is a medium. And that is true. I don't know. So.
And this is where I just don't feel like any of this needs to be categorized. This is where it's all so very loose. Let's figure out what it is before we try to, cram into a box. And like what, some people with like paranormal investigators, like paranormal investigators do, with shadow people, for example. Well, a shadow person means this, and this. Oh, no.
It means that to you. I mean, there's one particular TV show that I've been having on my TV recently that every time a shadow person comes up, it's something evil and an evil entity. It's like, no, that's not what it is. So you've said that you are a clairvoyant. So what is clairvoyant for anybody who doesn't know?
So clairvoyant is, according to Kelly's notes, the ability to see, French for clear seeing, visions to receive visual images and impressions, often in the mind. Okay, so for me that bugs the crap out of me because that's not me.
So what is yours then?
Oh, I see, but it's not visions, and they often in the mind is definitely hit and miss with me.
So if you don't call it a vision, then what do you call it? What would you say that it is that you're seeing?
It's part of my vision, but so we're in our little office right now. Look at that doorknob. Are you getting a vision of that doorknob, or is your vision just letting you see that doorknob?
But I think that's the difference of whether you're seeing it in your mind or whether you're seeing it with your eyeballs.
And I would say a fair amount of time, as far as I can tell, I'm seeing it with my eyeballs.
But I still think that's clairvoyant because it's often in the mind, but it doesn't mean necessarily that it.
If we're using that little human construct word for something, yeah, by definition, it's seeing things with clairvoyant. But like you mentioned, it's just I don't feel like that's not correct. But it's correct. It's the closest you can get to correct, but it's not entirely correct.
See, I would almost say I've never thought of myself before as a clairvoyant, but when you talk
about seeing things all the time.
And that's what I was just going to say is when we're talking about saying that we see things in our mind, I see the spirits that I'm talking to in my mind. I can see a building in my mind. When I go into a place, I can see what it looked like 100 years ago or 150 years ago. So I'll see like a situation play out in front of me, like I'm watching a movie back in my head. So I've always just passed that off to that's my psychic abilities. That's my claircognizance, my sense of knowing. I just know these things have happened, but yet I know it because I saw it.
Well, that makes you clairvoyant then. You're
Jesus Christ. Okay, I'm going to have to go deal with a kid.
So I don't know how to take this over.
You got it.
Okay, so everybody. So I'm going to take a hard left turn because I no longer have anybody put reins on me. So Darren said I'm best with my senses. And Darren, if you wouldn't mind hitting up the comments section, what precisely it is you mean by that? Because to me, anyways, and I think this is part of why it doesn't fit, because it feels like it's coming from something, quote unquote, higher. It's in Kelly's notes a lot, is something higher. But it's basically just an expansion of those senses. So for me, I don't feel like I'm being granted a vision of, okay, for example, when we go out and do paranormal investigations and I, utilize my abilities, don't feel like I'm being granted a vision of the, guy in the corner room who's not really saying anything. He's just kind of hanging out. I'm just getting to see him because that's what my vision does. And I don't know if that's necessarily the same for Kelly. I'm making that introduction since she's coming back into the room.
Sure, of course, that's how it works for me. What?
No, so I was comment. So Darren made the comment that the chat's rolling. Darren made the comment that he just says, "I'm best with my senses," and that's exactly what we're talking about. It's just, for me, it's not being granted a vision by a higher being. It's my senses are different. So I can have, ironically enough, I have terrible actual eyesight, but somebody who has 20/20 just naturally has better vision. And that's, to me, what this more feels like. It's just an expansion of my senses. It's not something being put there by, you got higher guidance in the notes a lot.
Okay. And that I think makes sense, and maybe why I'm saying what I feel like I get isn't clairvoyance. Because to me, I would say clairvoyance would be if that higher power is giving me a vision of something. But this isn't that higher power.
This is also very implicit of some sort of higher power.
Wow. But it isn't something bigger giving me that. It's when I walk into a location, the location is giving me that information. The spirit is giving me that information. You know what I mean? So to me, that's where it goes back to the psychic part of it, but yet even that says higher guidance. So I don't know. It's also subject to what your thoughts and beliefs are. And like I kind of said at the beginning of this, guys, we're not trying to convince anybody what is or is not, or to tell you this is the gospel, you have to believe this. We're just telling you what we know our truth to be. Yeah,
we're running per our experience. So, like Mama Pat, if it's an apparition that multiple people could see, then it's not clairvoyance. It's just an apparition. If it's something that you are picking up and visualize, and some other than the quote unquote normal, then it's clairvoyance. And yeah, I feel like I would agree with that.
Yeah, oh, definitely. Because it's not clairvoyance if 5 people in a room are seeing it with their eyeballs.
That's an apparition.
Well, yeah.
So what about, we'll use like Shaler, for example, when there was that guy there and I was seeing him and it wasn't like so for those of you who can't see us, which is everybody, and maybe this is the difference, is when I say I see something versus when I see something. And when I say I see something the second time and you're hearing that little clatter, those are my bracelets. And that's me tapping myself on the forehead. Because sometimes it looks as obvious as, I used that example of a doorknob earlier. Mm-hmm. And other times it's just this, if I had to compare it to something, it's my imagination.
Well, and yeah, and that's exactly what it feels like. So everybody who's listening to this, I want you guys to do something for me. Take a second and in your mind, picture your best friend. That picture that just popped into your head, that's how I see things when I'm using my intuition. I never see or rarely see anything with my eyes. I see it in my head like it's a memory. Only it's not a memory because it's not mine. I've never been there, or I don't know this person, or there's no reason I should know that. So, but it's pretty rare that when I say, I hear them saying this, or I see this, or any of that, that it's actually using my 5 basic senses. I see it in my head. I see, I feel. Yeah. So my primary ability, of all the different types of intuitive abilities that I've stumbled across for definitions, the one that I feel is most accurate for me is claircognizance. And claircognizance is just clear knowing. I just know things. I don't have an explanation why. I don't know how. It's not some big moment. It's just, I compare it, the stupid example I give people is like if you're driving home from work and all of a sudden it pops into your head, oh, we need a loaf of bread. it's as simple as that thought popping into your head, except it's, oh, Uncle Bob just said that I need to tell you this, you know? So it feels like that same type of thought. That's like it's a thought that just popped into my head, but it's information or situations that I couldn't possibly have known. Details about events that I shouldn't know. So yeah, claircognizance is my primary. And then it gets convoluted from there because there's precognizance, which means I know things before they happen. So I'll see the movie play in my head before it ever really happened. And then when it really does happen, there's this wicked sense of deja vu of, hey, I've seen this before. I know exactly what's going to happen. There's claircognizance, which is right now, knowing now. But then there's postcognizance too. So I can sit down to talk to somebody and tell them about something that happened 6 months ago or 6 years ago. So that's the fun part of it is you can take this ability and divide it even further, each one of them. There are different types of abilities then as well that I still think that I would say we have it to a certain extent based on some of the things that we've been saying.
But I think everybody's got a little bit of everything.
We're all nuts. That's what I'm saying.
And I think that's where, so our approaches are a little bit different. So this is something Kelly's literally done her whole life, as opposed to me, who's kind of developing this stuff. And I don't know, throughout this process, I don't feel like I'm developing anything. It's more a matter of taking filters off. Mm-hmm. So I hit the subscription the mental subscription of everybody's got this. Everybody
absolutely
has this and can do this. It's just a matter of kind of gradually taking those filters off.
I mean, it really is. The filters is your logic sometimes. We logic ourselves out of allowing ourselves to experience the things that we're experiencing because we're told as we're growing up and as we're developing that we aren't supposed to see things. We aren't supposed to hear things. We aren't supposed to know things. And
to be fair, I feel like that's to keep the schizophrenics from the non.
Well, it is possibly to a certain extent, but I think, and I'm not going to say this to offend anybody, so please nobody be offended by this, but I also think that part of the reason that a lot of people were told that is when religion became a big deal, because religion says you're not supposed to be able to have these extraordinary abilities or it makes you evil or odd. You're talking to the demon. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I've been told I'm doing the devil's work. It's like, but I'm not. I'm helping people. I'm passing messages along. I'm offering them the guidance that their spirit guides or spirit is trying to get to them that they're having trouble hearing. So I'm just being the monkey in the middle, passing the message on to them, you know? So that's really hard when someone comes up and says, oh, you're doing the devil's work, or this is evil, you shouldn't be doing this, because it's like, I can't believe that. I can't. That was a dog. It's extremely noisy at the house tonight, guys, so really sorry about that. So we'll talk about a couple of the different types of intuition as well. So there's clairaudient. That is audient, the ability to hear messages from higher guidance. You can hear it through your ears, or you can hear it through your mind.
I don't have a ton of experience, so I've got one very particular experience in my mind because I've heard things. So when I say on investigate, I'm going to say on investigation a lot with this, just because this is kind of the realm all of this exists for me. So prior to this, I had heard things on investigations. I had heard children laughing. I had heard all sorts of other sounds that weren't actual mechanical on this plane sounds, but there were also things that other people heard.
Right.
And as time progressed, the only time I've ever feel like I specifically have been spoken to, and I think that's where I have a hard time with clairaudience is, you can hear things or you can hear things, and that's me pointing at my ear, because it's hard to differentiate for me. And for me, it happened at Malvern Manor. And it was like this. I don't want to call him a kid, but he was probably just in his early 20s ish. But he basically asked me what I was doing, and it spooked me as though I could it spooked me as though someone actually did it. Somebody actually came up to me and said, but I know that if anybody else were in the area, they wouldn't have heard it.
And it was funny that you just said that, because it kind of triggered something for me. It is hard for me. Sometimes I don't stop and differentiate. Like when that whole thing at Malvern Manor happened with the creepy crawly woman coming up the hallway at me, people have asked me, well, did you actually see her? And I had to stop the first time I was asked that question and say, did I really see her with my eyeballs? And honest to God, at this point, I still can't even say 100% yes or no, because it all processes the same for me. If I'm seeing it in my head, it's because I know damn well they're there, you know? So it is hard for me to stop and say, did I just see that with my eyes, or did I see it with my head? Did I hear it in my ears, or did I hear it in my head?
And I think that's the thing. I don't think there has to be a difference.
And I don't think there is.
There's a feel difference to it, but I think it all comes from the same place.
I do think a lot of mine is in my head. I see it in my head. I hear it in my head. But, you know, this clairaudient, it's saying that you hear things through your ears or in your mind. Well, okay, I'm going to have to say that I'm clairaudient then too, because when I'm doing my medium abilities, speaking to a spirit who has passed, I hear their voice. So just like you can hear, for everybody who's listening, think of somebody who has like one of those really low bass resonating voices. You can hear that in your head, right? So when the spirit's talking to me, I can hear that, even to the point that, you know how if their voice is low enough, it'll kind of rumble your belly a little bit. Sometimes when the spirit is speaking to me, it kind of rumbles my belly or rumbles my chest like one of those low voices would. But I still think I'm hearing it in my head.
Yeah, but if there's an actual like hard outside mechanical thing, I think that I'm trying to figure out how to phrase it without going to a deep tangent about like parallel universes and shit. I think it's got a foot in both. I think it's got this. When I say mechanical, I say pretty much anything like what I'm throwing out air quotes, but real world, as opposed to anything woo woo, which is, you know, arguably something separate but the same. Hence the para in paranormal. And I think these things are a way, like basically when you put your foot in both.
Right. Do we need to answer some of the questions that are being asked now, or do we need?
We can. Do you want to devote like the last 20 minutes? So maybe
well, I didn't know if it would be relevant to like talk about them as they're asking them.
Oh yes, yeah.
So I don't care either way.
So as of right now, none of them are necessarily applicable.
Okay, that's what I guess I was trying to answer. So one of the other things that another psychic ability. And it is a psychic ability, but it's almost one that people say as if it's a bad thing, because the skeptics of the world will say, you're not psychic, you're just reading their mind. Well, what the hell is that then? If I can read somebody's mind, how is that not still intuition?
Okay, so this is where the psychologist meets the parapsychologist in me. And I think there's a lot to be said for subconscious reading of human micro movements during interactions.
I mean, I guess I could see that in a certain extent.
So like specifically when it comes to people who are like quote unquote telepathic, what if they're just stupid good at reading body language and they might not even be aware of it?
But how's that not still an ability to be able to read that body language?
I'm not saying it's not an ability, but at that point it's not what we would call like a paranormal or metaphysical ability.
But isn't it if they're still getting the information that needs to be passed on to them?
But it's coming from an outside stimulus as opposed to what you have here, which is without using typical channels of communication. And when you're reading body language, it's still a typical form of communication, even if you're not immediately like conscious of those links that you're able to make in your mind.
But in my mind, all of it's coming from an outside influence because it's all coming from spirit.
But it's all okay. So now it's not
nature.
spirit, but this is now coming from one of the five senses.
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah, precisely, body language.
and there's some truth to that. There's absolutely some truth to that. I mean, and it is hard to not pick up on body language when you're doing a reading. And I will actively try not to because I don't want physical clues to guide me in a certain direction and make it be something that I'm going to talk about. And I think I gave this example on one of the other shows, or maybe it was one of the presentations we just did, but, I had this couples come and sit down in front of me and they kept telling me that you need to talk to them about getting in a motorcycle accident. They're going to be in a motorcycle accident. And I did not want to bring it up because here's this couple sitting in front of me dressed out head to toe in Harley gear. They had their riding chaps still on. I mean, it was obvious they were bikers. And I'm like, I don't want to talk about this because it's too damn obvious that they're bike riders and they're going to think I'm just making shit up off of what I can see. And that wasn't the case. I was very strongly getting a message. I had to warn them about this truck that was going to pull out in front of them. A red truck coming from the left-hand side wasn't going to stop and was going to turn in front of them, and they had to watch for it. And, I mean, it was very detailed what I had to tell them. And finally, I've worked with my spirits and guides enough to know if they keep persistently telling me, tell them, I damn well better tell them or they're not going to leave me alone. So I did. And I prefaced it by starting it out saying, look, guys, obviously I could sit here and look at you and guess you guys are motorcycle riders. So please understand that's not where this came from. But it's because of all the skeptics that made me even feel like I had to say that. I keep looking at the monitor because it's lightning outside and it's catching my eye. So, sorry. So down here in the computer room, we have security cameras outside of our house and the monitors are down here in this room. And so every once in a while the screen flashes and draws my attention and he's weirded out because I keep looking over his head behind him.
I think I'm missing something good.
It's just lightning, which is good. Don't get me wrong. It's kind of cool. But anyhow, so could I have said that I was picking some of that up from their body language because, and I get that they're yeah, I was going to say that's not necessarily body language, but
yeah, so for me personally, I'm not that good, but I do take a bit of pride in being able to read faces and body language and all that stuff. And it's an awful being socially anxious because that's something I'm always looking for. I'm like, fuck, am I reading wrong? Anyways, I lost it. I had a point. I was going somewhere and I lost it.
No, you can pick up on that body language. And honest to God, most of the time
Okay, so I think I know where I was going with this.
Okay.
So, but it's always been something I've actively studied. And this is where I wouldn't go as far as to say I could go out and fake being a psychic, knowing that I'm good at body language, reading body language. There's some people that just do this subliminally on a super strange level. And I guess I'm still in a feeling out phase. So do you think those people are is that an extension of psychicism or? Because I can't feel like that's an extension because it's coming from one of the five normal senses.
Okay, but I could see somebody have a twitch in their eye when something's said and not instinctively know that it's because of this situation. I think that it could maybe be a trigger, but it doesn't necessarily explain everything. So if I see you walking with a limp, can I use your body language to say, oh, he hurt his leg? Yeah. That's not intuition. But if I see you walking with a limp and then I'm like, well, he hurt his leg because he had a dry run, whatever thingy those are. And he, the dry.
Oh, the dry trap.
Yeah, those are it. Oh. And you overdid it and you fell off the treadmill and you whatever. If you tripped on your shoelace and you fell off the treadmill and you slammed into the wall. And, if I get all of that because I saw you were walking on it with a limp, that's not just reading your body language. Because there's no way that I should have known you're walking with a limp because your shoe was untied and you tripped on your shoelace and you fell off the treadmill and it threw you into a wall.
Fair.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So yes, the body language, in my opinion, can be a trigger, but it doesn't necessarily give you everything that you need to know. An example would be, so somebody sits down to read and they want to connect with someone who's passed, and a name comes up and they burst into tears. That's a reaction. That's body language reaction. But are those happy tears or are those mad tears? You don't know
Mad
for
tears?
sure. Oh, yeah.
Generally,
Oh, no, there's been mad tears.
it's not going to say, but there is. So when you see someone crying, you can't immediately tell what emotion is attached to that.
Not necessarily. I mean,
So maybe I have stuff going on then too. I just don't know about it.
and that's what I was going to say is 99% of the time, yes, I can, but not always, I don't know. There's something to reading the body language of it, absolutely, which goes into the whole reading the minds thing. Am I picking up information because somebody was thinking about it? Okay, well, let's take this a step further. Somebody thinks about their great aunt who's passed away. Just that thought connects to their great aunt's energy, and that brings the great aunt in, which allows me to connect with the great aunt and talk to the great aunt. So I'm not reading her mind, but yet her mind is what created that connection for me to talk to the aunt.
And this is exactly why none of this shit should be categorized.
I mean, you can go in circles with all of this, and that's...
So I have a question for you. We've got 3 questions. I feel like we can knock those 3 questions out.
Okay.
And at some point, I wanted to dive into actually like developing.
Oh, yeah,
intuition.
absolutely.
So maybe make
I
that
do
for
want to
another
touch
episode.
psychometry before we're done, though, because I think that happens a lot of times to people.
I thought I had another or something.
Clairsentient is
Yeah, so that would be technically like a clairsentient. Psychometry is just an extension of clairsentientism. It's being able to touch something and know. Or is it receiving a touch, like being touched?
Psychometry has to do specifically with receiving or reading the energy of a person, place, or thing.
Okay, so.
Yeah. Where clairsentient, that clear sensing or feeling is more, I just feel like you had an amazing day at work.
Oh, so this has nothing to do with physical touch?
No, I don't know.
I don't know why you felt that, because...
I'm just saying, I make shit up for examples. So, okay, questions.
Okay, so first one, go figure, comes from Darren.
We love Darren.
So Darren wants to know about the best place to get in touch with your intuition. I've got 2 arguments for this. Not arguments, but like potential positions. So if intuition is an all-encompassing thing, literally anywhere could be the answer. Mm-hmm. Now, I also feel like that depends on the person. Mm-hmm. So for me, the best place to start developing my intuition was out in paranormal investigations. It was that getting to feel and see and on occasion hear these interactions. And it was a place where I could get validation, which I think is the important thing. For me anyways, and I feel like it should be important for everybody who looks to utilize this as much as possible. It's the best place to get validation. And whatever's good for you is, I don't think there's a specific place. It's wherever you feel like you can get the most validation, because I think some of this, as strange as all of it is, should still have a root in reality, or you never are totally able to tell the difference apart. Like you can, sit here and claim claircognizance, but until you're assuming family vacations way before they even happen. It's just an assumption. It's just assumption. And by taking that as gospel, that makes you, deluded.
Right. And I think that there's a lot of truth to that. So what Chris said is absolutely right. It's not like if you go to this latitude, longitude, that it's going to work better for you here. However, with that said, I think the best places for a person to get in touch with their intuition is going to be someplace where they're safe. And someplace where you can, like you said, receive that validation. But it's also a place where maybe you can receive some of that guidance from people who have done this more often. That's part of the reason that I started teaching intuition classes, is to give people that place to come to be able to learn about the different types of intuition that were out there and have an opportunity to get some hands-on practice with it with other people who may have experience or may not. And they're in a safe environment. So I don't think anybody should go to Velisca and try to tap into their tuition for the first time. I don't think anybody should go to Waverly Hills Sanitarium and tap into their intuition for the first time. But I think it's perfectly reasonable to say you could go to a place like Mason House or Granger House or Cambry and try to tap into your intuition for the first time, because those are safe places. But you also don't have to go to a haunted location. I mean, I can tap into my intuition sitting here in the basement of my house just as easily as I can in a haunted location or in a spiritual location. So physically, there's no certain place that's easiest to tap into it. But you want to make sure wherever you're doing it, that you're doing it safely. And that goes back to the thoughts on protecting yourself and having at least a vague idea of what you're doing, because if you just open yourself up to receive any energy that's out there, it may be something not as fun. And no, I'm not jumping to demons, guys. I'm jumping to, if I open myself up to receive the energy of the people of Walmart, that's not a good thing. So you just got to be mindful of where you're at when you do that.
That's one question down. So Mom and Dad wants to know, are dreams intuition?
I think dreams absolutely can be intuition. Not every dream is going to be intuition, guys. I mean, if you have a dream that you're a walrus flying through the sky, smoking a peace pipe with John Lennon, then may not be anything.
You took the brown acid, didn't
I mean,
you?
it may be something, but it may not be. But your intuition absolutely can speak to you in dreams. And there's multiple reasons for that. Because if you remember back towards the beginning of the show, we were talking about how we talk ourselves out of our intuition. We logic ourselves out of our intuition. And when we're falling asleep and when we're waking up, we're conscious enough to still receive the messages and remember them, but we're not so conscious that our logic is getting in the way of receiving those intuitive messages. That's my truth.
Agreed.
Was that? That's all you got?
Yeah, yeah, pretty much. So dream state isn't, and I guess this can actually kind of tap into Mom and Dad's other question, which is, can meditation increase intuition? And I think, yeah, if that's what you're meditating for. Obviously, when we are in our normal state of mind, like a beta and alpha wavelength brain level, that's where we exist when we're awake. Once you start altering that, for me anyways, that's when I've noticed that things open up more.
Oh, absolutely.
And you do that naturally when you dream, but you can also put yourself in that state through meditation. And I think that meditation can be a huge helper. And this is actually, I feel like we could almost tackle a whole show on this with the right group of people, which is the difference between like psychic mediumship and shamanism.
Oh, yeah.
Because I would
love to tackle that at some point.
Because I was just kind of thinking, like, so when I, go into Journey, the drums are required, and it's almost like a visual meditation, but it's not, because it's something that's actually happening, and I'm definitely somewhere else. But
I feel that way when I'm doing a meditation.
Exactly. But during we're going to need to tackle this in an entirely different show.
Sounds like we have a topic for a show.
But yes, that altered state is not a requirement, but it's definitely a good stepping off point. So I would say to answer both questions, I would say that dreams can be a extension of your intuition, and yes, meditation can on occasion help increase your intuition.
Yeah, and the meditation it's helping you remove that logic from getting in the way of receiving those intuitive messages, just like when you're doing a dream, except it's a conscious decision to remove those blockers. You're opening yourself up to receiving the messages and putting yourself in a better situation to receive those messages. And the more that you do it, the more that it becomes like a muscle memory thing for you. So you'll find that it gets easier and easier and easier to meditate, and it gets easier to make that connection. And Allison had made a comment that she can't stay focused. She needs someone to help her meditate. I am absolutely right there with her. I cannot meditate without it being like a guided meditation. The closest I get to that is when I step myself off to the side and count to 5 so I don't go to jail. That's about as close as I get. And I don't know that that's as much meditation as it is calming my ass down before I snap on somebody. But
no, and I think that's some of it. So for a guided meditation, that's somebody like talking you through.
Right.
And like I said, different episode entirely. But when it comes to the shamanism, I'm not being coerced in any direction for that.
But sometimes, and I've tried it with just music before too, and sometimes that'll work too, that I let myself just wander and see where I go and see. And I think that's probably more like your journey.
So as long as we're on the discussion of
shaman and psychic.
Oh heck yeah. So a good practice for me, as long as we're talking about medication thing, meditation can be your medication.
Not necessarily recommended, but
for me, it's a lot more. I can stay very zen, but it's very counting breath. So like the in breath is a 1, 2, and I just focus on that 1, 2 until I realize I'm not focusing on anything at all. And that's advice I like to give people who have that issue, because you feel like your brain has to focus on something.
On something.
Yeah.
On something.
So it has to be something very droll, like 1, 2.
I do the rainbow.
1, 2.
Oh, see, I do the rainbow.
I haven't heard about the rainbow.
So when I'm meditating and it's not a guided meditation, so with the guided meditations, it's like walk into the forest and you will see. And I'm like, I'm in a field. I'm supposed to be in a forest, but I'm in a field. And then I distract myself because I'm not where they say I'm supposed to be. So I've got to myself to be, it's okay if I'm in a field and not a goddamn forest. Just focus, Kelly. But if it's not a guided thing like that and it's just music and I'm trying to meditate, I'll focus on the colors of the rainbow. Because like you said, it gives me something to think about that I don't have to think about thinking about. So it doesn't distract me so much that I can't still get the messages. So I just start picturing the colors in my head: red, orange, yellow, green, blue, and they kind of like float through in the colors. And then all of a sudden I realize in these colors that are floating through there, here's other things coming through in the colors that are floating through. And there's little images and and from there, here comes this message and here comes that message. And it's like, oh, okay, well, this is fun. Here I am. I'm there, and I have to have something or my mind wanders off. So I have to have something I'm thinking about, but not something that I have to think about thinking about.
Same thing, just different approaches.
I don't have to think about thinking, damn it.
So Darren wants to know, and unless we probably squeeze in another one other than this, but if not, this could be the last question. Darren wants to know, where did you have an issue? I'm assuming you meant to say with your intuition. If at any point your intuition's been an issue.
So for me, I think the problem that my intuition, where I struggled, I don't want to say necessarily the hardest, but when my intuition came back in middle school is probably one of the places that I struggled the hardest, is just because I'm an empath as well, and we didn't really talk about empath, but an empath is a person who's able to pick up the feelings, whether they're emotional or physical feelings of other people. And so I would not be able to control my emotions. I would be super happy for no reason, or want to burst into tears for no reason, or mad as hell for no reason. And that was one of the times that it was hard to control, and part of the reason why I started.
Sounds like a standard American teenage girl.
Well, and it was, but it wasn't just a standard American teenage girl, because it was me and the hundreds of kids that I went to school with too. I was taking it all on because I hadn't learned how to protect myself yet. So multiply the standard American girl by 200, and that was me. Probably I'd say the other times that it's been hardest to deal with my abilities is some of the information that I get. And I've talked about this before, it is 100% a gift. I'm never ever going to say that it's not a gift, but with this gift comes responsibility and comes a lot of things that it's not all sweetness and light, guys. I mean, I shared this story the weekend of the Waterloo Expo, but you know, when you have a beautiful early 20s young lady sit down in front of you, and one of the very first things you're told is she's got a couple months to live. That's hard. That is so hard, because then it's like, not only am I having to try to figure out, what do I talk to her about? What do I tell her? How much does she know? I'm dealing with the fact that this beautiful light sitting across from me is about to be snuffed out. And that's hard. Whether I know her personally or not, that jolts your soul to know that. So I think that those are probably the times that it's hardest for me. It's just when I get information that's very hard to bear, or like when I'm in Villisca and I'm watching the murders happen. That's hard. It was hard watching him kill the entire family, but to watch him walk past the youngest and take a couple steps past him, thinking, I don't have to kill him. He's not going to remember me, and stop and turn around and go, no, but they said everybody, and hit that baby in the head with an axe. The emotions that I went through at that point were overwhelming, because I was so sad. And I felt what that baby felt, and furious that he could do that, you know, and it's hard because you feel it all.
You see, I'm not going to go nearly as deep.
I've been doing this a whole lot.
I was saying, it's fresh for me, so when it's an issue for me, when it's fucking inconvenient. And not necessarily when it's inconvenient, but when I'm not expecting it. So like the guy who talked to me at Malvern, I wasn't ready for it. So I'm like sprawled out on the floor trying to take a picture down this big, beautiful, creepy, dark hallway. And I just hear, what you doing? Like pretty much in my ear. It scared the shit out of me.
Or the face at Mason House.
The face at Mason House. Exactly. So for me, it's not that. It's just when it's inconvenient or I'm not ready for it. And then Darren wants to know, what about the expos with all the people and traffic? I don't know what's wrong with me.
Where do we start? Oh,
but
go ahead.
It's not. So it may be this. So when I'm directly interacting, like when I actually have to talk, and part of it's just tiring the introvert in me out. It's just physically exhausting to talk to people. But I get like a buzz from it, and I don't know if it's just from the number of people in one place.
It's got
but
good
I'm
energy.
not having and maybe and part of this is like having a handle on this, but I just kind of let it flow.
Yeah.
And when you grab onto an electric fence while your feet are on the ground, you just kind of like you get zapped because you make a current. Yeah. But if you're elevated at all and you grab an electric fence, you just kind of letting that current flow right through. Mm-hmm. And that's that. I do think at one point it was exhausting for me. But now I just kind of let it flow and it feels all right. And that's with not just expo stuff, but places like Edinburgh Manor. Mm-hmm. used to be so insanely high energy for me. It would shut me down.
Yeah.
And yeah, that was just fantastic advice. Just let it flow. And it flowed. And now it's just kind of how I approach pretty much any high intensity, high traffic situation, like, well, expos and stuff.
Yeah. And I think you're doing a great job with that. And I think that's what needs to happen, because I do that when I'm doing readings for people, because it's impossible for me to read for someone and not connect with their energy. So I'm going to feel that energy regardless. But what I realized I was doing, and I realized this once I was Reiki trained, is like I'd take in their energy and read it, but I'd clean it and give it back to them. And then I'd take more energy and I'd clean it and I'd give it back to them. And in the process, we're cleaning our energy. And it's just like it's spiraling between the two of us like a washing machine. And it's just cleaning. And by the time we're done, we're both left, hopefully, with better energy than we started with. So I would be good like doing readings. And that always made me wonder, because I'd hear other psychics and mediums at the end of a show go, "Oh my God, I'm so tired. I can barely stand up. I'm dead." And I'm like, "Really? I'm good. Let's go." And I realized that it's because I'm doing that. But on the other side of it, I have to allow other people's energy into my energy bubble. When to go back to the example of the high school or the middle school and feeling everybody else's energy, one of the first things that I had to learn to do was to protect myself, and how to put a bubble around me to make it so I could not feel everything that was going on. So I didn't know things about everybody else. And so that my intuition basically was only on when I wanted it to be on. Because otherwise it's too much. It's too overwhelming. It's constant, and nobody should live that way. That's not healthy for somebody to live knowing, feeling, seeing, hearing everything that's going on with everybody that's around them. So when I'm at the expos, honestly, for the most part, I'm pretty good, because I've got my little bubble around me, and the expos have amazing energy. So I'm soaking in that good energy. Don't get me wrong, but there's still a protective bubble that's not letting everything come at me. Okay, so expos. We're talking about expos. This is the moment to do a shameless plug.
Oh, it's not a shameless plug, because it's beneficial. It's good. And it's a fantastic way to segue into the sign-off.
Right. So the expos that we are talking about are the psychic and paranormal expos that Mama Pat and I put on throughout the state of Iowa. A week and a half ago, we had our first expo of 2021 in Cedar Falls, Iowa, and it was amazing. We had so many people and such good energy. And then coming up this weekend, which is going to be April 10th and 11th, we have the Dubuque, Iowa Psychic and Paranormal Expo. Saturday from 10 to 6 and Sunday from 10 to 5. Admission is $5 a day. Gets you in to visit with all of the vendors and allows you to go in to see all of the presentations that are being done for the day at no extra charge. So super cool event. I'm excited to go suck up some good energy and have fun with great people.
And if you're just into the spooky shit, you'll also be able to find Traveler's Moon at Omaha's HauntCon.
And what a great segue into our next thing to talk about. Yes. So then after the Dubuque Psychic and Paranormal Expo coming up this weekend, our next event is going to be April 23rd.
4th.
Let's get the right date so Jamie doesn't kill us. April 24th.
Yes.
It is HauntCon, which is in Omaha, Nebraska, just across the state line for you Iowans who may not know where that's at. HauntCon is put on by the amazing Jamie Chad. And segue into the next thing, she is actually going to be our guest in 2 weeks. So Jamie's going to come on. She's going to talk to us about HauntCon, how it got started, who all the guests are going to be, kind of what we can expect to be going on April 24th. And she's just a hoot and a holler, guys. So she'll have all sorts of fun stories for us outside of HauntCon as well, I'm sure. So look at that segue and just roll into the next thing.
Goes into the sign-off. You already knocked the sign-off out of the park?
I think we're good. We got to write down somewhere, though. We need to have a show, Psychic versus Shaman.
Oh, yeah. And specifically Sherman Journey, there's a bunch of nuances we can get into. Anyways, it's going to happen. All right, everybody.
And we need to have a show about like protections and different types of protections. And
this was just the introduction.
So many things.
This is just the introduction.
Anyways, awesome. All right, do your thing, Mr. Voice.
All right, everybody. Thank you for tuning into the Traveler's Moon podcast. As always, I am your host, the Paranomad, Chris Nielsen.
And I'm Kelly McCarville, Moonspinner.
And thank you for tuning into the live show on Paranormal Buzz Radio and Spreaker. If you're not tuning into the live show, what the actual fuck are you doing? Tune into the live show. You get to be part of chat. It's a fun time. If you are listening to the live show, you're a freaking champion. And we love you just a little bit more for it. She wants to say we love everybody the same. No, we love you a little bit more because you're in chat. So if you haven't yet, be sure to hop on social media anywhere at Traveler's Moon. Keep up to date with the shows, where we're going to be. I know we've got a bunch of live events. There's also some digital events coming, live streams from places like New Freaking Orleans.
We have some
the Waverly Hills
crazy
Sanatorium.
freaking travels coming up, folks.
It's going to be a bananas year, so hop
we
on.
We have Lent Mansion, we have Waverly Sanitarium, we have Gettysburg, we have
I wasn't going to give them all of it. If you want all of it, go on social media. If you want all of it, go on to social media of Traveler's Moon. Hit that like button, hit subscribe, and do all the good things. We love you.
Thank you, everybody.
2 weeks.
Join us. We'll be talking with Jay and Chad. Love you guys.